Let me turn to each panelist and ask you to introduce one big idea that can sort of be the centerpiece for your discussion that will connect the discussion tonight around math and sustainability.
We need to have a global ecosystem that is providing, number one, a meeting place of the project owners that need funding and the investors who want to invest in this project. So both of those parties can actually have global exposure and what they need. We need to have modernized version of the ESCO model. This is the model for investing in energy conservation projects. We see blockchain as the driver that can combine all of those individual needs and make this whole thing work.
So one question you can ask is, what should be the carbon price? What is the effective carbon price? Another question is, how fast should the carbon price go up? Right. So from the economics perspective, I can assure you that the answer is not as fast as possible. You can see that this easily lends itself into a dynamic optimization problem in the mathematics perspective, and that is why I think that quantitative approach is quite important in the success of carbon pricing policies.
There are many patterns in nature that, if you look closely, they're full of mathematical meaning. I mean, imagine a rain tree. The veins of its leaves, when you zoom out, it kind of looks like a branch of leaves. And then when you zoom out again, it looks like the shape of the canopy, right? So similarly for the bronchioles and bronchi in our lungs and the dendrites and neural networks in our brains, they have a fractal pattern to them that explains the shape of their branching and networks. And for the nerdy folks among us, you would already recognize that yes, this is where the Fibonacci sequence and golden ratio are all around us. What if we can make the materials that we build our cities with more like living things? The idea of mimicking nature for human solutions is biomimicry or biomimetics. Right? One very tangible example is mushrooms. So fungi have inside them a network of these fibers called mycelium, which coincidentally have the same kind of geometry in their structure that I just talked about. Some scientists have found a way to combine fungal mycelium with bacteria in a new kind of bioconcrete for buildings. So I think this is a huge idea that the industry can definitely learn from.
The heart of this system is a very old concept called ESCO. That is the golden standard of energy projects. When I first saw smart contracts getting mainstream, Ethereum and Vitalik Buterin showing that those standards are actually now very easy to implement, I already knew that this is tailor-made to actually bring ESCO contracts in the digital era. It is perfectly matching what an ESCO contract is. So that is the first place where blockchain is actually perfect for this purpose. And then there's a second one, of course, all the transactions, incoming and outgoing transactions in those projects. If we use blockchain, those are faster, cheaper, transparent, and of course we can eliminate to a large extent banks as intermediaries and make it even cheaper and more flexible.
There are different ways, of course, to price the carbon. One is to directly put a tax on the emissions. The other one is that the government set a quota of total emissions allowed for the economy, and then this create a carbon market. If you establish a carbon market, start to think about the property rights issue, enforce it, allocate it, and let people trade the property rights. Good thing about the market is that you actually leverage on the power of the market to reduce the cost, or I should say increase the cost effectiveness of carbon abatement. If there are two firms in the market, A can reduce carbon cheaper than B, then A will have the incentive to do the abatement itself and sell the right to emit to B. Market can actually be leveraged for sustainability purpose instead of seeing the market as the enemy.
Nature is the OG decarbonizer, the original decarbonizer.
True.
Forests regulate the climate by storing greenhouse gas, and we know this, and as the Earth's forests, they absorb on average 16 billion metric tons of CO2 annually. And it does this as part of the natural carbon cycle. But nature's elegant way of dealing with carbon doesn't work if you chop off parts of it. We're now seeing some opposite and negative effects where human activity can turn forests into sources of carbon. Thanks to land clearing, wildfires, and the burning of wood products, Forests also emit about 8.1 billion tons of the gas back to the atmosphere. We also really need to be saving the trees we have. We're working with nature to restore the best decarbonizer. It is one of the most elegant solutions.
In order to accelerate the transition to net zero, it's very important to think about carbon pricing policy. If you try to do good, you want to, as a society as a whole, like from the ethical perspective, we should also think about how to reward people who do good to society instead of demanding them to sacrifice their profit all the time.
Any update on how we can use all these fancy AI, whatever, networked information, and let's go back and recreate the nature's original and most efficient battery, photo battery. And where are we?
The closest thing that I know of, I mean, there's probably stuff happening in biochemistry labs and some biophysical labs now, but one that I know of is not actually biochemical. It was using genetic algorithms to learn, to figure out how to position arrays towards the sun in the most efficient way. And this is interesting insight that came from there is after many iterations of the algorithm, the shape that was suggested was actually in the shape of a sunflower or like a flower. So it was like petals, and that turned out to be the most efficient arrangement. But yes, I haven't yet heard of like chloroplast manufacturing or a lab, and I really hope somebody does this.
And you mentioned about you need to have a market forces so you can reward those that's actually doing good. What is the prospect and how do you see the progress of this market kind of mechanism in terms of driving the right behavior going forward?
It requires predicting what's going to happen in the future. We can start to think about, okay, what has been achieved in the past decade. We've got the carbon market being tried out in different parts of the world. And now we're thinking about green finance, which is an important trend in Europe and also in China. We're thinking about how to create institutions that can help to drive investment, money to green activities, and to avoid the problem of greenwashing, to accelerate the transition to net zero by focusing on the financial aspect. These are the market developments, trends, and people are trying very hard to work on it.
About hope, I would agree. This is the newer generations. Every next generation, building on what I just said, is feeling this as a more urgent issue, so they're doing more and more, so the effort is actually escalating.
I'm glad that there are many efforts trying to improve the sustainability accounting, sustainability reporting. All the listed companies by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange rule, they have to it's mandatory for them to report their sustainability impact. And now we've got the IFRS Foundation setting up the International Sustainability Standards Board, creating a global baseline for investor-focused sustainability reporting standard. And all these are very important in driving the money to the right direction, driving investment, financial capital to the right company. The battlefield, one of the battlefield in sustainability is in the financial world.
My hope is people in the room, actually, our young people, because the young people are our future. They will outlive us, and we need to give the nurturing, the encouragement, and the support, everything that we can do to master them, to reveal the better nature of themselves to the world.